So good morning, everybody. You're very welcome to our webinar, Introduction to Literacy. And this is specifically for people working and volunteering in the community and voluntary sector. My name's Derv and I'm the Literacy Development and Outreach Worker with NALA. I'm joined today by Claire Reardon, our Plain English Coordinator, and Maurice Sammon, one of our board members in NALA and a long-time literacy ambassador. So just some housekeeping before we get started. We are recording, and if you could keep yourself on mute just while the speakers are presenting. Thank you. We really will try and get you finished by 11. I know you're probably all very busy today. So just some of you might be a bit new to NALA. NALA stands for the National Adult Literacy Agency. We're a registered charity and non-governmental organisation, and we have two main roles. We support adults to improve their reading, writing, everyday maths, and digital skills. And then we'd also work with organisations like yourselves and promote the use of being literacy friendly in your work. So we do this through training webinars like this. Our Plain English team does Plain English training. We'll speak more about that. And I suppose why we're so focused on the community voluntary sector is because you really are the closest to communities on the ground across Ireland who are most impacted by unmet literacy needs. Because when it comes to literacy and education disadvantage, it's all wrapped up with inequality. And I suppose for us, you're really key to tackling stigma and embarrassment and fear, because you're a bridge or a link for many people between their communities and where they live and the state supports and structures where they can get help and support. And so for us, you're really key on helping people overcome those barriers. And that's, I guess, why we're really keen on supporting you as much as we can when it comes to training and events. So today we're going to look at, it's going to be a real broad introduction to literacy as an issue in Ireland. We're going to first hear from Maurice, who's going to talk about the impact of literacy on life and what it's like to return to education as an adult, and how important it is to get a good referral maybe from people like yourselves working in community organisations to education support. Then we'll look at what the context is in Ireland. What's the situation with literacy? What kind of level of need are we talking about in the country? And why is there a need? And then we're going to move on to a bit more practical stuff for yourselves around what it means to be literacy friendly in your work, and what you can actually do next. Some small steps you can take straight away after this webinar. So Maurice, I will hand over to you. Maurice is a board member, like I said, of NALA. He's a writer, a long-time literacy ambassador, and was a former student of the Waterford and Wexford Education and Training Board.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to give a little bit of a talk this morning about my journey back to education. It's great to see so many that will give their time to something like this, because it's extremely important. I left school when I was 13. I went straight to work without the ability to be able to read or write. Back in the time, this was the late 60s, early 70s. In the 60s, I was going to school. There wasn't any help for somebody like myself. The classrooms were too big. The teachers weren't fit for the job. So you're just pushed aside, ignored. You're more of a nuisance than anything to them. You know, it was too much like hard work. So I never grasped the ability to read. I could write my name to the familiarity of the letters, but I couldn't read anything, and I couldn't write anything. When I got a job in the buildings, it was perfect, because back in the day, there was nothing asked of you. So all you had to have it was a strong back. They didn't care about a strong mind. There were no timesheets. There were no save pass. You could just work away. There was nobody going to ask anything of you. And I was absolutely delighted, because I was away from the embarrassment. And let me tell you, the embarrassment would be fairly high on the scale, because kids will be kids, and once they find out there's something, let's say, for the want of a better word, wrong with you, they will harp on that. So I was delighted to get away from it. The teachers weren't much better, to be honest with you, but we leave that behind me now. I go a little bit further on. You wouldn't, back in the day when I was in the early years, you wouldn't actually hear anyone out there to give you a helping hand about it. I'm sure it was there someplace, but you'd have to go looking for it. And I mean, seriously looking for it to get help. And you'd actually want to really want that help and to be able to put the stigma of the fact that you can't read or write behind you. So you would more or less just leave it there, just in case somebody might find out about the fact that you can't read or write, and that would, in their estimates of you and yourself, it would shatter you, the bit of self confidence you'd be after gaining anyway. So you'd hide away from it, and I did for 40 years until my health broke down through an addiction, alcohol addiction. In hospital, I was lucky enough, thanks be to God, to come across a social worker, and I was ready at the time to talk about my problem, for the want of a better word for it. And she was able to put me on to Tramore Adult Education Centre, to Emma Cole at the time. She was the, the organizer in Tramore at the time. And the hardest, I can honestly tell you now, the hardest thing I ever had to do was actually go down and through the doors of the centre, because in my mind, no matter what was said to me, it was going back to school, you know. And I, as I said earlier, my experience of school was um, was anything but good. You know, actually, it put cold shivers through me just thinking about it. And I can remember sitting in the car park, walking in between the cars, and I made several goes at the door, and I just turned around and went back again because I just couldn't get over this fact. You'd have to open up to somebody, so a stranger, you know. But eventually, I said, "Cop myself on, go in." I went in and I met up with Emma, and I mean, it was like coming home. To be honest with you, talking to someone that knows what they're doing is a massive difference. They sit down, they talk to you as an equal, you know, and you feel that you're an equal, and that does opens the doors in your own mind. You're able to give more of yourself. Um, it's like really talking to a friend, and if you take anything away from today, of this talk I'm giving to you, if you take anything away from it, is that um, a person's perception is it and their belief of what you can do is the first few minutes they meet you. Emma didn't take out any pen or paper, didn't write anything down. She just had a chat with me. About halfway through, she said, "What would you like to do yourself?" And I said, "I'd like to be able to grasp this reading and writing. I never, get, as a child, I could never get it." I said, "I want to see, am I capable of getting it?" And she said, "I can guarantee you, Maurice, you will be able to read and write. It will be totally up to yourself. If you want to learn to read and write, you can definitely do it. We can teach anyone how to read and write." And I said, "I want to learn a bit about computers because I knew nothing about it. I never worked a bank machine. I never had a bank card. I didn't know anything about them, mobile phones or anything. I knew nothing. I was back in the Stone Age, you might as well say, you know. But I always learned quick, you know. Um, in the buildings, I learned several different trades very quickly, but I could never take any of them up as a job because the simple fact is I couldn't do the paperwork was involved in the trades, and every trade got a certain amount of paperwork, let me tell you. And also at the time, at this time, things started to come into the building sites like timesheets, um, your safe pass, all this kind of thing. So, and especially the job I was after getting myself, you had to do an examination and to get a qualification to do the job. I was fitting stoves and fireplaces at this time, and a heat test. You'd have to do it's a 2 day course you would have to do, and you'd have to pass that at least get 80% just to sit it again and 100% to pass it. And it was one full day in a classroom with nothing else but flaming writing, you know. So it was essential for me to to grasp reading and writing. And I thought, oh God, this is going to be a long drawn out, but I was willing to give it as much as it would take. But like I said, you're dealing with people now that understand, and they understand what way you learn. And that's what they actually first thing they found out is, what way do I learn? And within 12 months of being down there, I could I was reading books, you know. It amazed me. You know, I could open a book and I could understand that these words in front of me made sense, you know. 40 years of hiding the fact. And it was more or less an accident that I got where I was, got back to education. Look, if you want to say, and it shouldn't be down to look, you know. The advertisement should be out there. The advertisement, I think, mainly to get rid of the stigma, because that's still there. I know friends of mine that I knew in the buildings, I didn't realize at the time, but it's clear to me now, they were in the same boat I was. But nobody would mention anything to anybody else because of the fact you didn't want anyone to know about it. And like I said, in their eyes and in your own mind, it brings your estimations down of who you are. It doesn't make a difference how capable you are at your job. You're less of a person in their eyes. That's what you believe, you know. Uh, your your job really, to me, is vital. The first contact to somebody, the first time you talk to them, that's the impact. That's what stays with you. I'm back in education now 9 years, and I will always remember word for word that conversation I had with Emma, that first conversation, because that's how important it was to me. The door was at me back to walk out, and I tell you, I would have walked out, you know. If I thought it was anything like the experience I had at school, there's absolutely no way I would have stayed. But once I learned that you're talking to a person that understands you, understands what you want, and want to help you for the simple sake of no other reason but to help you, you know. Um, Within a couple of months, they couldn't get rid of me out of the place. I was signing up for every flaming thing I could get my hands on, because I loved it. I really, and I would believe it. That's just not me. That would be anyone in my situation, because it's laid there in front of you, and it's up to you. And Jesus, let me tell you, uh, nobody wants to live the way I lived. I tell you that now. I mentioned earlier about an addiction, and the addiction was direct result of my lack of confidence to talk to people, and that's straight through the inability to be able to connect with people, because when you're at the level that I was at, you're never really you're never really in with society, if you understand what I say. You're always out there looking in. It's like a joke you don't get. You laugh along, but you don't understand it. You can't give of yourself, because somebody might find out your secret. It affected relationships. It affected the way I worked. The how far I could advance in the job I was at. I was a labourer on the buildings, and that's what I stayed at, because that was the least education you needed. Now it's different. Labourers now, you have to have your safe pass. There's always timesheets, introduction into jobs. Um, it's way more important now. It was always important, but for any kind of job, it's you might as well say it's vital now. If I could say to anyone, if I could talk to anyone that would have had the same problem I had, to tell them to go back to education, um, without a doubt, I put my heart and soul in it. But I know what it's like now, but I still think of myself in the car park what I didn't know. And that's what you have to overcome, that fear that's in your mind. and it's very real to somebody like myself, very real. And that's the thing that'll stop you from going through the doors. And God, if I hadn't, I, I can seriously tell you, honestly, I wouldn't be here today because I would have went back drinking. I know I would have, because that's the reason I stayed off it. And I haven't touched a drop in 9 years. And I went back to education 9 years ago, and that's no coincidence, let me tell you. Listen, thanks very much for listening to me. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice. You have me running out of notebooks because every time you talk, I'm scribbling away. You have the most brilliant way to communicate things, and I'm going to rob half of it. But thank you so much, Maurice, for being so
Thank
honest
you.
and open and speaking. Does anybody have a question or anything they'd like to ask, Maurice? Messages coming into the chat there, thanking you, Maurice, for speaking.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
And I suppose for us in Nala, Maurice and other people who have the experience of going back to education, as you can tell, they're the best salespeople. And you know, if you do in your own services and organizations have worked with people who have gone back to education or maybe struggled with their literacy, and you know that they have, you know, benefited a lot. They are the best advocates for your services, to be honest. You know that already, probably. I'm sure you all have your own advocate and ambassador programs, but really people relate so much more to people who've gone through it and who've walked in those shoes. Definitely for us, that's been Na's experience. So I'm just gonna share my screen once more, get the slides back up. So like Maurice mentioned, loads of things about literacy there. And for NALA, we have quite a broad definition of literacy and an understanding of literacy. Yes, it definitely is reading and writing that we'd all kind of relate to as that is the functional literacy. But it does go broader. When we talk about reading, it really is reading and understanding information. It's so that people, not just that they're comfortable reading the words, but can take the information they're reading and take action on it. Writing and spelling, of course, is a totally separate skill from reading. And so you'll definitely come across people who might be more confident reading, but would be very low confident writing, and particularly their spelling. Everyday numbers as well, we would include in our definition of literacy. So this is the things could like with money, like Mara said there, you know, using an ATM. It could be dealing with your timesheets, you know, filling things out like that. It could be looking at your pay slip, understanding like how much money is coming in, what tax you're being paid, like all of those everyday tasks that we do with numbers. And then we'd also include digital, and like Mara said there, you know, so much is changing, particularly in the workplace, but also in public services. There's a lot more asked of us in terms of reading and writing, but often digital. You know, for example, you know, some family members of mine, they were referred for a blood test. And even though they were referred by their GP, they still had to go onto the hospital website to book their time. You know, those kind of tasks were not there 5 years ago. And it can be really overwhelming for a lot of people, particularly if there's a reading and writing issue. Digital then is this kind of another layer. And we would consider listening and speaking as part of those broader kind of communication and literacy skills. It's very, you know, part and parcel that when you have lower self-esteem or you wouldn't have confidence, you'd be very wary of speaking up, asking questions, particularly of people you might think of maybe have more education, such as if you're dealing with a doctor or maybe a lawyer. And so you're less likely, this is what we've been told, people are less likely to ask for help, like Mara said, or to ask any questions, even if they do get a chance to be with someone that could help them. They just wouldn't be as confident. And we really find, like Maurice mentioned there, that a lot of people have more than they think they have in terms of their literacy, or obviously all of us are capable of learning. But when you've had such poor experiences of school, you really don't necessarily believe that. And so there's a huge job. And like Maurice mentioned, in the education and training boards where the adult education and adult literacy service is based in Ireland, they are fantastic because they're relationship first. They know that they have to to learn about that person, get to know them, put them at ease in order for that person to have a positive experience and stick with it. You know, it really is all about the relationship first and foremost before you get into skill development and learning. So there is a study that we base our kind of understanding of what the literacy needs in Ireland are. It was done in 2012 and we got the results in 2013. And this told us how many adults in Ireland struggled with reading and understanding text. So for example, you can see the woman in the picture on the left there, she's looking at the back of a bottle of vitamin pills. So someone who might find it hard to look through that list of ingredients and figure out what it is, maybe that she's looking for vitamin C levels, for example. So how many people do you think in that study, so you can use a percentage, how many people out of 100% would struggle with reading and understanding the back of a nutritional information or a medicine packet? You can put your guesses in the chat. So you have some guesses there. 50%, 30%, 60%, 55, 1 in 5. Okay, so I'm going to ask the same question. What percentage of adults in Ireland struggle with the tasks using numbers? So if we look at numbers, and that could be, see in the picture there, the person trying to figure out how much they have to pay after having lunch with friends. How many people do you think, what percentage of adults might struggle with that? So we've got 50% back up there again. Yeah. Okay, and then my final question is, what percentage of adults do you think struggle with digital tasks? So you can see that laptop open there with an email. You know, how many people in Ireland, what percentage do you think might struggle with sending an email or finding out information on a website, for example? So pretty broad range there. We've got 65. Yeah, a lot of people saying the digital piece would be a higher percentage. So in terms of everyday text, like the back of a medicine bottle, the study told us that 18% of adults in Ireland. So that would be 1 in 6. And that's over 500,000 people. So that's quite a lot of people that are struggling with that everyday reading and understanding tasks. And then when it came to the numbers, it was 25%. So that's 1 in 4, which is over 750,000 people who would struggle, say, working out their bill in a restaurant or a discount off something in a shop. And then finally, with the digital side of things, it was 42% of adults. So that'd be about 4 in 10. And it's over 1.2 million people would struggle sending an email. So like I said, this study was done in 2012 and it actually was done last year again. So the second round of it was done last year in Ireland. So we should be getting new statistics by the end of this year in 2024. And that we're hoping will tell us, hopefully, maybe things have improved. The study only speaks with people who are from the age of 16 to 65 because it's for a working population. They're trying to see among workers the levels. But it is something to watch out for. And obviously NALA and our other colleagues in SOLAS, the further education training body, they'll be really sharing these statistics. So do keep an eye out. Absolutely. Someone there making a point about the age groups. Yeah. And the fact that over 65s weren't included, you know, we would assume that there would be a higher rate in that age group because of all of the challenges in school that people over 65 might have had. It would have been a very different school system. And like Maurice said, a lot of people weren't happy there. So you probably would say that the older people, there might be higher rates of issues. So just to give you a different context, it wasn't only Ireland that did this study. There were 24 countries. And you can see us there, the green line there, Ireland. So we were 17 out of 24, which is not great. And it was a bit of a reality check for the government. And it has pushed a lot of new policy in the area of adult literacy, and something NALA have advocated for a long time, to have a whole government approach to this issue, because it's not just about the Department of Education. It's much broader than that. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So just talking about the needs. So if we're looking at 1 in 6 people, adults, finding it difficult to read and understand some texts at that level, and the same when it comes to everyday numbers, 1 in 4, and then digital tasks, 4 in 10. What do you think is the reasons behind this? You know, how did we get to a situation where adults are struggling in this way? Does anybody have any kind of ideas of what might have caused this in someone's early life, that they grew up without being able to develop these skills? You can just put your answers in the chat there if it's handy for you. Yeah, so we've got some examples straight away there. Unidentified, yeah, dyscalculia, dyslexia. No access to education, absolutely. People had to leave to work to help the family often. Yeah, neurodiversity. So maybe someone was autistic, they didn't know, their teachers didn't know, they didn't have any, supports for people. Trauma for sure, and family challenges. Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, like Maurice mentioned there, was like sometimes the class sizes were just really big, and it was difficult to be seen. You could slip behind fairly quickly, and then if you didn't feel like you were keeping up, you wanted to avoid the attention of everybody, so you might have tried to sit back as well. So everybody there, all the answers, absolutely. And there's so many different factors. There's no one thing in someone's life. It can be a combination of many things. And we generally look at 5 main areas in NALA, buckets, say, of types of causes that might have influenced someone and turned out that they left school without their literacy skills for everyday life. Family is a big one, of course. If things are going on in the family, maybe there's alcohol, drug addiction, challenges, parents are unsupported, and there's a knock-on effect. It could also be that someone's family members may not have had access to education, they experience educational disadvantage, so maybe they're not able to give as much support in terms of the other classmates when it comes to homework. And also, if you've had a really bad experience in school yourself as a parent, you may not trust the school, understandably, because of what you experienced. So there could be a tense relationship with the school as well. In terms of education, all the answers you gave in there, big class sizes, none of us, many years ago been educated about neurodiversity of learning difficulties, so the supports weren't put in place for children. And unfortunately, if you were a child that was frustrated in school and you couldn't sit for 6 hours, which is not unusual, you might have, acted out, or what was seen as acting out, and then that affected your relationship with the school and the teachers. And social and economic, of course, having a safe place to go home at night. A lot of people don't have supportive housing. They might be sharing in B&Bs or in family hubs where there's no place to play or to do your homework, quite a stressful living environment. And people would also tell us of, their family not being able to pay for books or for school tours or the extra stuff that was happening in the school, and they couldn't engage with it because the family didn't have the money to pay for it. So there's lots of inequalities. And then you could also be growing up in an area where lots of people are living on low incomes. So the school doesn't have the same fundraising ability as you might see in schools in wealthier areas. So you tend to have less opportunities for extra things for the school. Health and well-being, a lot of people would tell us that as children they had anxieties and nerves. Maybe there was a lot of other children around them and that wasn't very relaxing for them to learn. Lots of things like that. So that really affected, and they just didn't like being in school. And their mental health maybe suffered more when they're in school, so they left. And then finally with digital, like a lot of people did not go to school when digital technology was available, the internet and stuff. So they learned much later at life, which made it a little bit trickier than the young people say who are growing up with it. And it's just part of their day-to-day life. And also there's a digital divide, it is expensive to have access to the internet. It's expensive to buy devices, and some people just don't have access to that. So they're automatically, at a disadvantage. So like you have all mentioned in the chat and all of the ones we've just discussed, so many things, so many reasons, and it's absolutely not the individual's fault. That's the reason we go through this, is because no one person could possibly be responsible for all of these things that affected them, particularly when they were a child or an older young person. And people need to hear that a lot of the time, because they felt either, unfortunately, they were told there was something wrong with them, or by other children, or by teachers, or unfortunately family members. You can't learn, you're doing this, you're doing that. When you're young, you listen to those messages and you don't forget them. And so I suppose as adults, it's about creating the space for people to understand that they just didn't get the right support at the right time. But the time is now, and adult education is an amazing and safe place to come back, gain your confidence, and access education. And one of the things, obviously, we always talk about literacy and inequality, but the Matthew effect is a really important point. It's that without any intervention, if someone like me who left school and went to university, I get offered more training and education because I already have some. And those who didn't maybe leave school confident in their literacy skills, they get less access. So the more education you have, the more opportunities you get. And so it's a really big inequality. And that's what we, and all of the great education and training boards and literacy and adult education services are trying to correct that imbalance, because it does follow you throughout your life. You get more opportunities when you've had more. So that was just to give you a sense of what the situation is in Ireland. But now we're just going to look a bit at the literacy-friendly approach. And this is what NALA promotes, I suppose, for all organisations working with the members of the public, basically. So a literacy barrier, I want you to think, what could be a literacy barrier? Maurice mentioned a few there in the workplace. You can think of the services you use every day, think of the ones your organisation provides. What reading and writing barriers might stop some people from accessing those services? Can you think of anything? Could be in your service or just one you use day to day. And you can pop it in the chat there. Yeah, applications and forms for sure. Having to register digitally, definitely. That's a very interesting one. Yeah, social media. If you're not on social media and that's the only place somebody provides information, then you can't get it. Absolutely, overcomplicated forms, the ATM. Yeah, knowing where to go. That's a really good point. And I think it kind of moves back to the social media point as well. It's like there's a bit of an assumption that everybody has access to social media or websites or would know where to go. You hear this sometimes in NALA when we talk to people, they'd say, the worst thing you can tell me is go online. You're in a public office or you're in a shop or something, to say, just go online. And it seems so easy to the person that's saying that, but for the person receiving that, that's like a mountain to climb, it's happened so fast, that change in digital services. So all of those things that you said in the chat, absolutely, they're all literacy barriers. So for us, we promote this literacy friendly approach to overcome basically those barriers and make sure that people who might have some challenges with reading and writing can still access your service. So it means being aware. So doing things like this webinar, or we have some free online courses you can do as well to kind of just understand literacy more. Then it's about doing something about it. So taking account of those needs, removing literacy related barriers in your organization, your groups, your programs. Like once you're become more aware, you do tend to see them. And then it's about trying to figure out, God, do we really need that form? Do we really need to do it in written? Can I have that conversation with someone? Do I create a leaflet or can we do a short video? It's trying to just be more aware of what would someone do if they weren't a confident reader. And then it's about promoting them as well. So we'd love for you to maybe think about things in your organization, literacy barriers you can remove, but also that you would promote it, because many of you, of course, will be working with state bodies, organizations like Intrio offices, the HSE. You'll see the barriers in those services. And if you're in parts of networks or coalitions or groups, that you would raise this issue of literacy barriers with them, and that be an advocate for literacy friendly approaches. And the reason we do this is really you cannot be sure who understands information and who does not. So if you regularly see the same people, you might get some sense or an idea of their skills and maybe what they struggle with or don't. But if you are just seeing people the odd time, or, you know, doing casework on a one-off basis, you really don't know. And so we always say, just treat everybody at risk of not knowing the information. You know, gently offer alternatives, and people can make a choice or a preference of how they receive information. So, you know, do you want to take this flyer home, or will I go through this information with you now? Offer both, and the confident reader will take the flyer and be gone, you know. So it's just about gently not assuming people will be comfortable with your reading your information. So I just wanted to show two examples. This first one is from Carlow Library. So Carlow Libraries did a piece of work with NALA around being more literacy friendly. And they came up with this great idea. You need two things when you join a library: a photo ID and a proof of address. And there's a form to fill as well. In order to, I suppose, make it more visual and clearer for people, they decided to create this poster where they showed the different forms of ID you can use to join the library and the different forms of proof of address. So it's much more accessible for, to be honest, for all of us. The minute I look at that, I see a passport, I'm like, okay, great, a passport. For all of us, even those of us who are confident readers, visuals are, it just goes to our brain quicker. But it's obviously more inclusive for people that wouldn't want to read a lot of block of text. So that was one element. And then the second part, and it's okay if you can't read this, I know it's a bit fuzzy, but it's just to show you what they also did was they have an example form filled out for their application, and they have it laminated. So if someone wants to join the library, of course they ask, will I go through the form with you? But even to help those who would like to take the form, you know, and sit down, they say, here's an example of the form filled out, and you can see where the name goes, the address goes, the date, all of the information they need. And it's just to give a little bit of support to that person, to show, oh, you know where to put your name in and the different information. So it's just one example of what a service has done to try to be more literacy friendly. The second example is a video from the Donegal Travellers Project. And they did this really simple video on a phone about an event they had coming up. So they wanted to tell people about the event. And they did this by using a video. So I'm just going to stop sharing so I can open this video. Sorry, 1 second. Now, can you see the video?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claire.
My name's Pam McColloday.
And we're here today to invite you to our Family Day event, which is going to be held on the 1st of November at the Our Leisure Centre. You know what, Pamela? I think it'd be better if we show them exactly where it is and what we have in store.
Let's go.
Hello, folks. So, we finally made it out here. So, it's here at the Our Leisure Centre in Letterkenny where we are going to be holding our event here. So, Donegal Travellers Project will be running the family event on the 1st of November, where we're going to have loads of things for the family. We're going to have such as the sports and entertainment for the kids, along with arts and art competitions as well. So that'll be fun. Then we're going to have men's football for the men also. So there'll be lots for the whole family.
Yeah, and we're going to have some hair braiding for the women if they're interested to get their hair done. We're going to have some nails as well. Maybe they might want to get a few nails done. And we're also going to have some massages for anyone who wants to sit back and relax.
And I know what you're thinking, I nearly forgot about it. Yes, we're going to have food as well for everybody that comes, and there's going to be tea and coffee and refreshments. Also, there's going to be Gareth Kerwin out here singing lots of country western music, and he might do a bit of karaoke if anybody wants to flex their voice. And then last but not least, we're also going to have loads of different services here, and we wish that you will come out and avail and see what we have in store. So, last but not least, we hope that you come, and we hope that you have lots of fun.
And a fantastic time.
Thank you.
That was just a very simple video promoting an upcoming event. And what's the beauty of it was it was done very simply. You know, it was done on a phone. It was very relaxed, ad-libbed. And it's really important that you don't feel you have to be exceptionally, you know, what's the word? I suppose smooth and professional about these things. Sometimes we can get a bit nervous, but actually what's great is the two people that are working in the project are doing the videos, so their faces are familiar. They're very conversational and informal, and they're just giving the details of the event. And it's just a lot more effective than a post on social media with just the information in text or even a flyer. And, you know, I want to go to that event, you know, they seem warm, it sounds fun. So it's just one example of how you can be literacy friendly by using video. Instead of doing a social media post, or you share the video, of course, on social media, but instead of just having block text. So we have a couple of slides in here about responding to people's needs. So I touched on one of them already in terms of, are you okay with filling this out, or would you like to take it home with you, or to stay here and we'll go through it together? Just about casually dropping in that offer of support when you're one-on-one with people. I'll let you go through the detail of those yourselves. Another piece that's really important and something we've picked up from health professionals in the state is checking for understanding. So, you know, when you might be working with someone and giving them a piece of information, or they have to do something after they leave you, like go to the intro office or post something, get a post-it or something like that. Just check before they leave. I just want to make sure that I explain myself properly. Can you tell me what you're going to do next? So you're checking in that they've taken in the information and you've explained it clearly. And it is your job, I guess it's our job to do that. But because sometimes people will just nod, and I'm sure you've come across in the organization, you spend time with someone, they seem to be responding and they seem to be aware of what's the next step for them, what they have to do. But unfortunately then it doesn't happen. So something falls. So it's just a simple thing of just checking in before a person leaves. Do you know what you're going to do next, or make sure that you have explained yourself properly. Don't put it on them for understanding, put it on yourself for explaining. So I'm going to hand over now to Claire, who's just going to give us a little overview of plain English.
Great, thanks very much, Derv. Good morning, everybody. As Derv said, I will give you a whistle-stop tour about what plain English, how it is defined, some of the benefits and how you might start to use it. And if you use plain English, we're all very busy. If you use even some of the techniques around it, it will really help to make your organization more literacy friendly and benefit people like Maurice and benefit, basically everybody. So the idea is that people notice when you use it and they notice when you don't use it. So I was in the Irish Cancer Society one day, and in their lobby they had a sign up saying, "We are a literacy friendly organization," and that really hit home with me. And more so when you view their material, because their material is easy to read. So the idea behind what plain English is you could see the definition on screen. It is an ambitious definition, which is I'm just admitting somebody there, which is about helping, it's a style of writing and presenting information so that the reader can understand it the first time they read or hear it. And it's about more than that, it is about language, it's about structure, it's about design. And a lot of people think about plain English and they think about the words you use, that they are everyday words, that you try and avoid jargon, and that's true. But I would say, particularly as people are busy, that it's very much about also the structure and design, how something looks and feels, its first impression, your perception of it. That's a word Maurice used. That can leave a lasting impact. So if you're working with very difficult documents that you have to work through with clients, service users, you just have to do it. You can perhaps change a few things about how it looks, and as Derv said, offer to read it with them if you do that, and that'll make a huge difference. So it's a little bit of a challenge to get a document or a form in particular such that it's easy to read and understand at the first encounter as such. However, that is the goal. So it has those three elements: language, structure, and design. And you're all the time thinking about, when you're inheriting material, documents that you have to work with, or creating material for clients, what does your reader know and understand? So if we go to the next slide, here is some of the considerations. Like it is obvious why you would use plain English. These are some of the reasons. You can see them there. It promotes better access to services. More people will come in. They'll feel that this organization has a nice feel or has a nice vibe about it. They'll see that in your material. And even if you can't create every document in plain English, you can edit one or two of the main documents, perhaps your welcome leaflet or something, using basic plain English guidelines. It'll promote better understanding, because even if you have a document that has a lot of words, if you manage to create fewer words through tighter editing and thinking about what you're writing, and write less, people will read it. They'll read that quicker than a very densely packed document, and it'll look less intimidating. It'll be easier for people with who find reading and writing and numbers difficult, and online work. There'll also be fewer mistakes. So if you want people to fill in that form correctly and you're busy and you haven't time to help them or whatever, if the form is as clear as it can be, then they're going to be able to complete it with less help, and you're going to have to follow up less. Those kind of instances, fewer questions. So for example, a revenue letter was written in America in the department there in Arizona, and it was written using the plain English guidelines, which we're going to look at briefly in a moment, some of them. And it got 11,000 fewer phone calls in the year when they had the plain English version. So you will see the benefits. Donegal Travellers revised one of their documents, and within 6 months had 18% fewer calls to their frontline desk in the housing department. You're going to see the benefits, you're going to track it. It's going to save time. It saved Donegal Travellers an estimated 23 days when they revised some of their material using plain English guidelines per year on work time for staff who are all busy. It saves you money. So the Royal Mail in the UK saved 500,000 in 9 months by redesigning one form. So these are very, significant figures, significant benefits. And I would say that on the next slide, then, your focus might be, as a worker and volunteer in your various organizations, to think, what could I do with service users and or with my colleagues to make information that bit more understandable for people? I could take one document, ideally a small document, and I could change maybe a few words that are causing a problem. So it could even be that people are confused about abbreviations like EG and IE. They take EG, utility bill, to mean it must be a utility bill, as opposed to that just being a suggested example. So you could write out such as utility bill. that sort of a thing. You could change, if you had to leave certain legal terms or privacy related terms, you could make sure that they were as clear as they can be. Through testing it with users, through using the plain English guidelines, some of which you see on the screen there. So the guidelines there are mainly based, just for this session, on things that you can quickly do. So you can change the look and feel of a dense document by changing its line spacing, by making a few quick cosmetic changes to, say, for example, if there is text all written in capitals, that makes it 10% harder for everybody to read. You could change that to sentence case. You can increase the line spacing, particularly if you're working with older people or anyone really, because it just makes information faster and easier to scan. And if you find reading and writing difficult, that's going to help as well. And if you write fewer words, shorter sentences, that's going to help people with literacy difficulties and everybody really to remember, to understand and remember. If you use certain fonts that are more attractive, that are broader, that are kind of a little bit fatter than perhaps Times New Roman, such as Arial or Calibri, that's going to make another little difference. So they're all very small differences, such as, you know, using a reasonable font size. 12 in most instances would work, and for headings perhaps 14. And all those small changes can make a measurable difference to the reader and the ease with which they read, understand and act, whether it is for like a document or whether they go online or just the initial look and feel of your information. I would say start small, and then the final two guidelines are around language, and they relate to using acronyms, words you can pronounce as words, define them, because not everybody knows what NAL is, and we have got calls for similar organizations because we haven't spelled it out in some instances. Define unfamiliar words. Glossaries are great. I have found that people use them and use the same words in the definition of the term they're trying to explain. So if they're explaining a network, they'll say this is a network of whatever, whereas the person might not know what a network is. So just really think of what it is the reader knows and understands. Use the active voice. The best way to write less, to write clearer sentences, is to start with the doer of the action. So citizens' information, write up-to-date content once a month. So the doer, citizens' information, is at the start of the sentence. Derv facilitates webinars. So Derv is at the start of the sentence, as opposed to, and that's the active voice where you put the doer of the action at the start, as opposed to the seminar was facilitated by Derv, or information is updated on the Citizens Information website by the Citizens Information content team. You can see the difference in length when you use the active voice and you start with the doer. So all these tips together, making a document or a piece of web content look and feel more accessible through literally selecting it and increasing the line spacing and do those changes, will really help. Adding in other guidelines, such as explaining complex terms, will also help. The most useful thing I would do if I was you would be read that little book there that Derv has linked to on screen, Writing and Design Tips. It'll take you 5 minutes and it gives you the overview of the main plain English guidelines. Other options then in terms of skilling up in plain English would be to invest, request funding to take part in half-day training with my colleague Sean Driver on the dates you see there on screen. And it would be a half-day session with other organizations going through the guidelines more in a practiced way. And Sean does the session such that you get the opportunity to practice writing, converting longer sentences into shorter sentences, writing, say, a piece of legal text and making it a little bit more accessible to have plain legal English, similarly with plain health English and so on. So he does it in a very kind of a nice way. And together it's a really interactive session. It's a very good investment, and people have left it and gone on to write health and safety statements with our supports at times that are much more accessible to people, just to link back. There's also a network you can join. It's free on LinkedIn, and you could post a question such as, if you have a question about, say, for example, terms to use to describe particular conditions or health conditions in a sensitive way, we will know probably that are directed to resources or other resources to use plain English. We also do free webinars, and you can see these advertised on nala.ie, where we'd have specialist speakers who talk about, for example, perhaps using design, icons, or visuals at times to convey a message. So it's plain English is about the language structure and design you use. It is about what the reader thinks is plain English. It is about your time and energy to invest. So I pick something small, work on that, show the impact. It is about asking the readers for their views, because their views are the ones that ultimately count. So I hope that that's whetted your appetite for plain English if you're new to it, or made you incited you to pursue it further, study it more if you already have an interest. So that's sort of my input for today. I hope it was of some use to you.
Thanks, Claire. That was brilliant. Really good. And it's really impressive to hear about particularly the statistics or the change that organizations saw after they adopted plain English. It's really interesting. I know a few people are signing off there and had to leave. We will give you all of the links and the resources. I'll send on the slides and a couple of other things to you. So don't worry, we'll send that on today. I just wanted to briefly touch on the adult literacy services that Maurice mentioned, and I've mentioned a couple of times. In Ireland in 2021, we got an adult literacy for life strategy. This is at a government level, and it's something NALA and many educational organisations advocated for a long time. Like I said, it's not just about Department of Education and the Further Education Authority. It's about the whole of government being aware of literacy issues, and again, public services looking at plain English and other ways of being more literacy friendly. So that an office has been set up to implement that strategy, and there are 16 regional adult coordinators. So there'll be one, for example, in the city of Dublin, one in South Dublin, one in Donegal, one in Cavan and Monaghan. They're based on sometimes 2-county region. So it'll be really good for you to click on that link and find out who your regional adult literacy coordinator is in your area. The local services that Maurice mentioned that he had used in Waterford. So again, those regions, the 16 education and training boards are split across 16 regions. And they provide that basic adult education and literacy service. It is always free and confidential. So that's from QQI 1 to 3 levels. And you can do that qualification and get a QQI, or you can go in and say, I want to be able to do at the Safe Pass. I want to be able to write a Christmas card to my family member. It's about your goals. It's not necessary that you have to do a qualification, but some people do find that very motivating. And they're all delivered by trained tutors. Most medium to large towns in Ireland will have an adult literacy service. So it's good to just click again on this link on this slide or the previous one around the literacy coordinators to find out the stuff going on in your area, the classes being offered. And then alternatively in NALA, we have an online tutoring service and an over-the-phone tutoring service. And this is useful sometimes for people that won't go to a class. Now, there could be many reasons. They might be caring for an older person, or they have children and they can't get out of the house in the evenings or in the afternoons. Might be someone who's just not ready self-esteem wise or confidence wise to go into a group class. So we can offer to connect people with a tutor that are on our staff. They're trained tutors, and they can work with people over the phone, or someone can use our online system. And sometimes, yes, it's not for everyone, the digital side, but actually some people who struggle with literacy find it quite useful because we have different functions on it, like speech to text, where they can play the words they see on screen and learn with that support. And then they can get phone support for using the Learn with NALA online system. So some people find it very useful, actually. And general information about these services and anything, we can look up your local centre and give you the information about that. Our free phone number, 1800 20 20 65. That's for anybody who's looking just to talk about brushing up on their skills, just to have the conversation and find out what supports are on offer. So just, I'll leave you with this. There's 5 things you could do in 2024 before the end of the year. You can do our 2 online courses. So NALA provides these free courses about literacy awareness and being literacy friendly. Take about an hour each. And there's a mix of videos and text. So just, it could remind you of what you've heard today and just give yourself to put it into the long-term memory, go through that course. Take a few minutes, go onto our website, learn our free phone, have a look around at that Learn with NALA platform and our tutor supports, and just know where they are. If the opportunity in the future comes up where someone might need them, that you know where they are and how to access them. You can join NALA as a member. The organisation you work for can do that. Members get a discount of some of our plain English training, and we also would have regular news and updates for members. And like I said, just get in contact with your local education and training board and find out the education service is what's going on in your area. And even if you have a good connection or you were in touch with them last year, things do change, you know, each semester. So keep in contact with them. And like all of the tips that Claire gave you, or maybe it's about using video for event promotion, choose one small change that you can make yourself for 2024 and try to stick with it throughout 2024. And just give yourself the chance to do one thing. None of us are perfect. There's no, you know, pinnacle of being literacy friendly. It's a constant process of reviewing what you're doing, how you're speaking, how you're writing. You know, myself, I could see in one of my slides there that not everything was aligned to the left, you know, and I should have done that beforehand. So you're learning all the time. So thank you so much for being with us today. We do have a feedback form that I'd love to hear from you about how you thought the webinar went, because we do like to improve, and I know it can be a lot of information being sent at one time. So you can use the QR code there, or I will send this link to you in the email with all that other information.